Super excited for today's webinar on formation, finances, and federal taxes. I'm going to give folks about 30 seconds to trickle in, and then we're going to get started. And today, what we're going to cover is, as you can see, the beginning to end journey for not just starting your business, but the ability to collect payments, move money, and keep your business 100% compliant. We have a very special guest today who's an expert and a big part of this process. So folks are trickling in. If you're tuning in from YouTube, welcome. If you're tuning in directly, welcome as well. And there will also be a recording of this. So if you come in late, or if you were just sent this link, don't worry, you'll be able to watch the entire webinar. With that, let's actually jump right in. And I'm very excited to introduce our guest for today, Alex from Mercury. So Alex, can you do a very brief introduction on yourself and Mercury, but save some of the special information on Mercury for later? Then what we're going to do today is we're actually going to run through the full journey from formation to finances to federal taxes. But Alex, thanks so much for coming on. Could you share a bit about yourself and a bit about Mercury?
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, Arjun. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. So I'm Alex. I work on the partnerships team at Mercury. Been here for a couple years, and work with businesses sort of in the startup ecosystem that we partner with to provide Mercury as like a banking partner for their clients, and focus mostly on startups, e-commerce, and really online businesses that can benefit from online banking. And I myself have been in fintech for about 10 years now, working mostly in tech companies that are trying to modernize some of these archaic systems and processes. So very excited to be here with you.
Likewise. And I'll do a very brief introduction, then we're going to jump in. My name is Arjun. Started Doola a few years ago because, similar to what Alex was saying, we saw a very archaic, outdated industry and thought, wait a second, why can't things be different? Why can't you do that using the power of technology? And for a very brief history of Doola, but then we're going to dive right into what problem Doola solves. Doola started with a mission or goal of, hey, can we make it easier for founders to get started? And we are blessed to be backed by some investors who believe in the mission we're going after and the problem we're solving. And specifically in terms of the problem, when you are starting a business in the year 2023, or if you're watching this in the year 2027, there's going to be some things which don't change here. There are actually many discrete steps you have to cobble together in order to just get your business off the ground. And you can see here that there's many different steps that you have to go through and navigate. And what we thought was, wait a second, what if we could make it easier for founders to do this? It doesn't mean we're going to do everything here. No, if anything, we have to find best-in-class companies to work with. But can we create this business in a box, this idea or way for helping founders get started, connecting them with the right partners so that they can form their company, set up their financial stack, and keep it compliant? And with that, that is exactly what we're going to do today. I've been in a lot of webinars before. Oftentimes you go in, there's lots of images, and maybe it's light on the details. We're going to flip things here. There will be images, but we are going to walk through the end-to-end journey of not only how and why you should start a company, but once you start the company, how do you get your paperwork to your tax number? How do you set up your bank account? What do you need to do to stay compliant? And we're going to go through that journey. So what you can see here is a timeline from formation all the way through compliance, including setting up your financial stack or your bank account. And we're going to run through that today. And we're doing it in Q&A format. There's going to be very clear questions, very clear answers. We're going to go through in a very chronological and linear fashion. So let's get started. First question, before we even start with how to form a company, one question I get asked all the time is, why should I start a company? And after talking to thousands of founders, I've consolidated the top 7 reasons we've seen. The first is the ability to actually transact in the US dollar. That means actually, even if you live outside the US, you can actually start a business and move money and work with dollars. That means you can work with customers who are comfortable paying in dollars. That also means you can have dollars and use it internationally too. The second is the social proof of US financial infrastructure. Having a US business or a US bank account holds weight. It holds credibility, and it can be seen as a sign of trust with customers. That leads into the third, the reputation of your business. Having these US assets or US company or a bank account really gives you this added weight or reputation. Add in things like a mailing address or a phone number, and it can actually help you get more business simply by having a company. And that's number 4, the social proof of having a US company, given the US business reputation. 3 more I want to highlight, which we hear. Number 5, which maybe should have been number 1, is limited liability protection. When you start a business, if you do not form an entity, you personally are at risk if your business defaults or faces a lawsuit. By having a company, there's this veil of protection, protecting your personal assets in the case of a lawsuit. Number 6 is actually, and we're going to get into this, you can't get a business bank account without a US business. So if you want to get a business bank account, you can't skip steps. You can't go straight to getting a business bank account. You're going to have to do a couple things before, which we'll run through. And then the final thing is, in this day and age, the world is flat, meaning you're serving customers, you're global by default from day one. And having the US as your global hub can, again, hold weight, give you access to the ecosystem in the US, whether it's dollars, capital, investment, but serve as that central hub as you're building this global business. Now that you know some of the top reasons, let's get into some of the nitty gritty here. The first question, which everyone asks, which makes sense, is should I form an LLC or a C Corp? Now, I'm actually going to give you a concrete answer here. I'm going to give you an actual answer. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer or a CPA. I have to give this obligatory disclaimer, but I'm going to give you an actual answer based on thousands of conversations. This chart effectively shows 3 of the main entity types. Now, I'll actually caveat that. An LLC, a limited liability company, and a C corporation are entities. An S Corp, which you might have heard about, is actually a tax classification. So it's not an actual company type. You can form an LLC or a C Corp and have it elected to be taxed as an S Corp. You'll see here that in the 4th row, what is each entity type best for? To really boil it down, limited liability companies are great if you're a small business, a creator, a freelancer, or sort of working on a side hustle. A C Corp is a fantastic, I'll actually say required option, if you are raising US venture capital. And then an S Corp can be a beneficial choice or election, one if you are a US resident, and 2, you are making above about $50,000 to $80,000 in revenue per year. Now, to even simplify this further, between LLC or C corporation, you're going to get that liability protection in both. The C corporation is more investor friendly. The LLC is a little easier to maintain, and it requires less paperwork. So to give you an actual concrete answer, because I promised I would, this is how simple I'd make it. If you're raising US venture capital, form a Delaware C Corp. Why? Investors will actually require it. Else, form an LLC. For some of the programmers in the room, this is an if-else statement, but if you're raising venture capital, go with a C Corp. If not, form an LLC. Now, next logical question is, what state should I form in? I'm going to give you an answer here. I'm not going to say, hey, it depends. Obviously, it does. But if you live in the United States, you should form in the state that you live in. If you're forming a C Corp, do it in Delaware. But if you're forming an LLC, form in the state that you live in. And the reason for that is if you form an LLC in the state outside of the state you live in, you end up having to pay double the fees. A fee to form the LLC and keep it compliant in, let's say, Delaware. But if you live in New York, like I do, you then have to pay those fees for a registered agent and annual compliance in the state. If you don't live in the US, lucky you, you can choose any state. But I won't leave it at that. I'm actually going to give you a recommendation on what state I think you should form in. The 2 most popular states we hear are Wyoming and Delaware. Okay, I'm not going to leave it at that, though. What do you recommend between Wyoming and Delaware? Delaware is the most popular state in the US for business formations. Fun fact, there are more companies historically created in Delaware than the number of people in Delaware. Delaware is just very sexy. It's popular. A lot of companies are formed there. Wyoming, though, fun fact, is actually where the first LLC was created and invented. And the other massive thing about Wyoming is that the annual fee is significantly cheaper, $62 to the state versus $300. So my recommendation is this. For online businesses, which most businesses are, Wyoming is fast, friendly, great for online digital businesses, and there's a lower annual fee. So I would actually recommend a Wyoming LLC if you're a non-US resident. That being said, it is your business, your choice. Your business is your baby. And if you think having a Delaware LLC is going to help you with customers, or you just want the Delaware LLC, go for it. The other thing I would mention is if you think there's a slim chance in the future you might raise capital and you want to convert that to a C Corp, Delaware could help, but I wouldn't make that the main reason. I would say for a cost perspective and speed perspective, Wyoming is fantastic. But again, you're forming your business. If you prefer Delaware and think your customers will, I would say then choose Delaware. But Wyoming is my answer to actually give you a concrete answer if you live outside the US. Now, let's jump into the actual process to form a company. As I mentioned earlier, to get a business bank account, which you can see here is step 3, you actually need to form a company. It's required. You cannot skip step 1 of forming a company. And to form a company, you need a couple pieces of information. Company name, an address, which can be anywhere in the world, and an email. It's just to stay in touch. This timeline, depending on the state, can take about a week on average. Some states are faster. Wyoming's pretty fast. Other states can take longer. Also, if it's a busy time or a holiday, or if there's something like COVID happening, things can take even longer. After you form your company, the next thing which you need to do if you'd like to get a bank account is apply for an EIN or an employer identification number. If you are a US resident or citizen with a social, you can get your EIN online in about 1 to 2 days on average. If you do not have a US SSN, it can take up to 8 to 11 weeks. Now, the good news is something we like to do is under promise and over deliver. That being said, don't sweat. Times are faster than 8 to 11 weeks now. But if you live outside the US, we have seen cases where it can take up to 3 months to get your EIN. So if you're thinking, hey, I actually want to open a bank account tomorrow, you should have probably started your company and applied for your EIN a few weeks ago to play it safe. Now, step number 3 is actually setting up your bank account. And we're going to get into this. But in order to open up a US business bank account, you need a company and you need an EIN. The 4th step here, just to jump ahead a tiny bit, is oftentimes people want to set up a payment processor so that they can accept payments and then connect that to their bank account for deposits. So you have to typically go in this order. Form your company, get the EIN, then you can set up your bank account and then connect your payment processor to it. With all of that in mind, we're now going to jump into how can you actually open a US business bank account. So Alex, I got a couple questions teed up for you here. You've probably heard these many times as well, but similar to what I've done, we're going to get right into the details and give people actual tangible answers. So the first question is, what is Mercury? Can you open a business bank account with Mercury?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mercury is actually a financial technology company, and we work with a few or a couple partner banks, Evolve Bank and Trust and Choice Financial Group, to provide uh, bank accounts for our customers. So they interact solely with Mercury, but we have partner banks um, that we're building the front end over. So what that allows us to do is kind of provide um, all the basic elements of business banking, checking, saving accounts, debit, credit cards, virtual and physical, payment methods, wires, ACH, check payments, and things like treasury management for yield, all within an online platform that you're able to access and apply for from anywhere in the world. So I think the flow you laid out is exactly right. Like the time you get ready to apply for a Mercury is when you have that EIN. That's really the main thing we need. And then there are some distinctions in whether it's a U.S. applicant or international, but I think we'll get in that on a later slide.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of
Mhm.
things which I'd love to dive into. So let's actually jump
Mhm.
right in.
Sure.
What do you need to apply for a Mercury bank account?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, um, very much part of Mercury's DNA from the time we had launched is the ability to support international founders. So, again, if you're creating that US bank account and getting the EIN, if you're located in another country, you're going to have the same online application process that a US based entrepreneur would have. So, you go to mercury.com, the sign up takes only about 10 minutes, and there's just a few things we need. The main thing being the EIN you were provided. If you're in the US, we might ask for a social security, but if you're international, we just need a valid passport. So it's absolutely fine if you don't have an SSN, you can still apply for Mercury. And then there's just a couple more things we need, the formation documents, which can be a few different forms, whether it's the CP 575, 147C, or a completed SS4. And then we just need confirmation that the business does, in fact, operate or at least plan to operate in the US, whether that means US suppliers, US customers, something that sort of shows the validity of why we would have a US business bank account. And that's basically it. That's all we really need to process an application.
Next question I need to ask here. You mentioned anywhere in the world. Can you truly open an account for founders in any country? And if there are restricted countries, can you talk a little bit about why that restriction exists, and does it change? A country's restricted and then it becomes allowed, and vice versa?
Yeah. So we do have restricted countries we can't accept applicants from. It sort of falls into two tiers, and we have a full list of this that, to your point, does change and get updated largely in reflection to um, global climate and U.S. relations externally and all sorts of international factors. But we have sort of a tier of restricted countries where we cannot accept applicants that are living in those countries. But if the founder is from there and living in a non-restricted country, we can still support them. And then we have a list of countries that are just flat out prohibited, usually due to comprehensive sanctions, something with the US government that makes it, something where Mercury would receive fines if we were supporting these businesses, and which just something we're unable to support. So we call out those distinctions in the restricted country list. I don't think any are particularly surprising, but it does change and update depending on some of those macro climate environmental factors.
Super helpful. And I think, so I can understand, and I think it's worth restating, you can be a founder from one of these countries, but as long as you're not living in the country, then it's okay. But if you live in the country itself, there's a restriction.
Yeah, correct. And so usually there's a way our onboarding team will sort of verify that, whether it's through utility, documentation, something like that, that's showing the actual location of the founder. But we'll work with them. Our onboarding team tries to approve everyone we can. We're reviewing these applications by hand. And if we need any sort of confirmation on that, we'll work with the founder directly to verify.
Amazing. I need to ask this again. You might have touched on this, but just to really solidify things, can you actually apply and open the account if you don't, one, live in the US, and two, are not a US citizen?
Yes, so absolutely you can. And again, it's something that was when Mercury launched in 2019. I think it was our founders from the UK, and he very much wanted Mercury to be available for him as an entrepreneur. And so it was one of those like foundational feature requirements we had when we launched Mercury. So all of our processes are very much built to support international founders. And what that means is their experience is exactly the same. There was a world where you used to have to like fly to the US and go into a bank branch and have a conversation in person. It's like, don't need to do that. You just go to mercury.com. You sign up, you have the exact same experience as a US founder would. The only distinctions being, instead of an SSN, we're going to need a valid international passport. But the application can be submitted and is reviewed in the same turnaround time as a US founder would experience.
Very, very cool. Now, another question which comes up a lot is, can you open a bank account for any type of business? And if not, what are the restricted types of businesses? And does this list change as well? Or is there anything a founder listening should know about, hey, unfortunately, if I am working on this type of business, I'm not going to be able to work with Mercury?
Yeah, for sure. There's a few business types we can accept, largely a reflection of sort of restrictions and requirements that our partner banks experience. But it's pretty limited. It's, any money services businesses, involvement with gambling, adult entertainment, and any sort of like for benefit of or trust accounts we can't support. Those are really the only like flat out restricted businesses we can't work with. And then there's some that maybe aren't a great fit for Mercury if you're dealing with a lot of physical cash intake in your business operations. We don't have cash deposits, so tends to be more for online businesses that are, a variety, whether it's venture-backed startup to smaller SMB. As long as the focus is more online, they tend to do really well as long as they're not in one of those industries.
Very, very helpful. Now, the next thing I want to ask is a bit about sort of how money works within Mercury, meaning money being stored in Mercury, and then some of the costs included too. The first is, I hear this term all the time, 4 letters. This happened or came up a lot recently, earlier this year, during the Silicon Valley banking crisis. But there are these 4 letters called, or FDIC. So maybe if you can do a brief primer here too and explain like in 5 is, what does FDIC insurance mean? And is my money safe with Mercury? How can I trust Mercury and ensure if I put money in, it's going to be safe, God forbid, if something happens?
Yeah, for sure. So FDIC, it's what is it? Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and essentially it's the government's supplying a deposit insurance to depositors in American commercial and saving banks. Obviously, it was very top of mind with everything that happened with SVB because it sort of implied how much do I know I'm covered versus this nebulous where are my funds and when will I get them. So there's a sort of default maximum of 250K of an FDIC credited bank. So if you put your funds in an FDIC supported bank, you're going to get up to 250K in just flat out coverage. What we were able to do at Mercury, and it's part of the benefit of this partner bank model I mentioned, is we're able to leverage our partner bank sweep networks. So these banks have their own banking partners that they're able to sort of disperse and allocate funds across. And in doing so, we're able to take a Mercury customer, distribute their funds across these partner banks via the sweep network, and expand that FDIC coverage. So when you sign up for Mercury, your default is up to 5 million in FDIC coverage, and that's due to our ability to take a Mercury customer's funds, leverage these partner banks, and get that 250K in a variety of locations and stack it up to the 5 mil. So as a Mercury customer, you don't interact with any of this. Everything's in your Mercury account, but on the back end, you have coverage up to 5 million.
Very cool. So utilizing the sweep to expand the coverage, and thank you for actually explaining what FDIC is as well. I think a lot of people have heard that
Yeah.
term, but acronym seriously sucks. So there we go. We learned something new
Yeah,
today.
for
Two-part
sure.
question up next is, I'm very curious, given everything you've mentioned, there's got to be some costs involved. So two-part question
Mhm.
is, what does it cost to use Mercury? And then second question I'll ask is actually just how does Mercury make money as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, Mercury was founded largely in a reaction to, um, how come these other processes as an entrepreneur and tools you need are improving, but bank accounts largely um, suck and aren't pleasant to interact with and have all these sort of feature limitations, whether it's searching transactions, copying account numbers, whatever it is. So, you know, part of Mercury's whole point in existing is having a much more pleasant banking experience, and part of that is getting rid of these confusing cost structures that make it hard for business to even understand where they're incurring costs. So Mercury accounts themselves are completely free. It's free to sign up, create an account. All the main payment methods, ACH, domestic and USD international wires, card payments are all free to the customers. There's very few ways you can incur costs. It's usually when you're leveraging more complex elements of the platform. We have an API where it's if you're doing like programmatic ACH payments, there might be a cost incurred there. We do have a currency conversion product. So if you wanted to do currency conversion, there's a 1% fee to cover those. And then there's a faster international wire option where if you choose to do that, there's an associated fee, but the normal way is completely free. And I guess the last one is we have a treasury product that offers, I think it's around 5.5% yield, and there's a very small fee to manage that. But there are no account openings, no minimums, no monthly fees, no overdraft fees. So for the large swath of Mercury's customer base who aren't using some of those more advanced features, it's completely free.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of founders listening, and founders geek out on business models. So I'm curious as
Mm,
well too. How do you do all this and then run a business at the same time? So how does
right.
Mercury actually making money behind the scenes?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple ways we're making money. I think the biggest is the interest we're earning on deposits. So, we have this aggregate customer base of, at this point, over 100,000 startups, and all of their deposits are sort of living under Mercury, and we're able to earn interest on those. So that's like the bulk of the revenue driver, and then the other would be the interchange from the card services we provide. So I mentioned we have free virtual and physical debit and credit cards. And so when Mercury customers are using those and spending on those, we get a percentage of the interchange, and that's a revenue stream as well. To a very small extent, we do make some on that currency conversion as well, but much smaller in comparison to the actual deposits and interchange.
Very fascinating. I guess goes to show technology, you can reduce costs and not only pass those cost savings along to customers, but also use that to build a pretty healthy, sustainable business as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, what I want to do is there's a couple rapid fire questions, and I want to ask these so that it's very clear, can you or can you not do certain things within Mercury? So these are pretty rapid fire. I think you've mentioned a few, but for everyone listening, I want to just clear the air. Can you or can you not? So first question, can you do ACH payments or wires with Mercury?
Yes, to both. And for wires, there's the distinction of domestic and international. You can do both. Free for all three payment methods. The only way to incur costs is if you're doing an international wire and converting from USD to whatever the local currency is.
Okay, got it. So yes to ACH, yes to wires, and there's a slight fee if you're going international with a currency conversion.
With a currency conversion, correct.
Okay. Another question is, I'm hearing a lot of digital here. Is it possible to actually work with checks?
Yeah, you can send checks through the Mercury dashboard. So we have like this send money flow that we try to keep super clean and just a few clicks. And that's how you would manage all of these various payment methods. So we don't issue checkbooks, but you're able to send a check directly through the dashboard. It's one of the options in that send money flow.
Okay, and I think you mentioned, can you also deposit the checks too?
Yeah, you can deposit checks remotely. So just as I mentioned with the send money flow, we have an add funds flow as well.
Got it.
And that's where you can go through that process of depositing a remote check.
Sweet. Two final questions here. Can you work with cash within Mercury?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it briefly, but we don't support cash deposits today. So that is the one sort of distinction. If you're an online business or if you're a business and you're sort of remote and like thinking about if Mercury is going to be a good fit for you or what the right bank provider would be, that's probably one of those ones where if you are a heavy cash business, Mercury wouldn't be a great fit. It's more if you're in the online space and not dealing with cash. There are options for cash-based businesses, but I think especially in this world of more neobank, challenger bank, it's kind of a similar distinction of mostly focused on like online payment methods.
Very cool. One other question, which I probably should have asked earlier, but can you also get a card with Mercury? So let's cover them both. Physical cards, virtual cards, and if there's a physical card, can I actually have it sent to me too?
Yeah, both. So absolutely. Usually the way a founder will do this when they sign up is you can spin up those virtual cards immediately. So whether you want to use the IO credit card or just get spending going on a debit card, you can spin them up right in the dashboard. You can create multiple. You can assign them to employees and have various permissions. And then you can also request a physical card to be shipped out as well. And you can really do that each time you're updating cards or changing them. The timeline varies mostly just depending on the country we're shipping to. And I think our support team will work with the founder in terms of like expectations there. I think it's usually around 2 weeks turnaround time for international. But the idea is like you're spending on the virtual card, you have that until your physical arrives, and then you're able to use both.
Very, very cool. I think it's always fun when, yes, virtual is great, but sometimes there's nothing better than just feeling the actual card. It makes things feel more real.
100%. Yeah. And we actually put a lot of work into designing the credit card, so it's a nice one to hold and definitely worth getting a physical.
That's awesome. That's so true too. That just the feel of the card goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now for folks listening, at this point, hopefully you've learned some of the benefits, you've learned the process too. And now I actually want to get right into, okay, if you are ready to, as we like to say at Doola, just doula it and get started, how can you actually form a company and get a bank account? Now, one thing I will say is for this entire process, you can DIY or do it on your own. But our business exists because we realized a founder's time is the most valuable and precious asset. And we want founders to focus on what they do best and the hardest thing, which is building the business, while Doola can handle the unsexy yet critical back office to ensure that you can get the paperwork and documentation done in order to successfully open a bank account and not just start your business, but run it and grow it. So I'm going to run through some actual Doola specifics in terms of, yes, you can DIY, but can you work with a professional or a company to help you? So the first thing is we charge $297 plus state fees to form a company. Now, to cover, this gets you everything you need to open a bank account. The company, a virtual address, you get an operating agreement, which you can think of as the bylaws for your company, help getting your EIN, whether you're a US citizen and we do it online for you, or we apply and fax a form to the IRS, and assistance in actually opening a bank account. So you could actually go right to Mercury and open an account. Or if you wanted to, if a lot of folks outside the US say, hey, can I get a Bank of America account, for example? Yes, you can, but you have to fly and visit the US and walk into the branch. So in some cases, not only will the bank not allow you to work with them if you don't have a social, but you have to physically visit the US too. With an option like Mercury instead, you can do this remotely and actually do it from outside the US as long as you're not on one of the lists of restricted countries. We'll also provide a registered agent as well, which is required, and we'll get more into the compliance side of things. Now, in terms of the cost here, a lot of folks might hear or think, but wait a second, I thought there were ways to actually form a company for $0. Now, technically, submitting the paperwork might cost $0, but one thing we try to do at Doola is just provide the fees upfront in aggregate for everything you need here. So you can see, and we've listed a couple alternatives. Again, I am fully for any business or company or person helping people start a business. I'm pro entrepreneurship and kudos to anyone doing this. But one thing we purposely tried to do is, can we offer as low cost of an entry option as possible? So we try to do that with this $297 cost. And again, any person starting a business or supporting people to start a business, I'm all for and love. More entrepreneurship, the better. Now, the other big question which comes up is, what about compliance? So we've talked about starting a business, we've talked about a bank account, but is there anything else I need to do? And one of the things which was actually quite terrifying to me starting a business was, you don't know what you don't know. You sort of know there are these compliance pieces, you know that there are things you have to do, but the worst thing I could imagine, well, maybe not the worst thing, but getting a letter from the IRS with a massive fine saying, hey, you're due to pay this bill. Now, that is actually why we've taken a lot of time to actually put together overviews on the full suite of what is required to keep your business compliant. And I actually want to come back to this image and run through it there. Everything we've actually run through so far in this presentation covers that first green box on the left. So that the information you need to actually get your bank account set up, that's formation, that's an EIN, that's setting up your bank account with Mercury, and then you can set up with a payment processor like Stripe or PayPal. On the right side here in yellow is actually the ongoing compliance, which is required for any business. So any business actually has to handle these. Now, you could DIY, but there's a couple things I'm going to highlight them. 3 main things that every business needs to keep in mind. The first is a registered agent. A registered agent is an obligation for any U.S. entity in the U.S. in all 50 states. Whether you're an LLC, whether you're a C Corp, or whether you've done the S Corp tax election, you need a registered agent. Now, what is a registered agent? I'll actually explain it to you. You can think of it as a liaison between the state and the IRS and your business. Quite literally, it is someone sitting in an office in the physical state who's taking mail, scanning it, and then with a company like Doola, that mail is scanned and uploaded to your dashboard. You might be thinking, hey, can I just be my registered agent and save some money? I would recommend no for 2 reasons. The first is you actually need to hold specific office hours and be physically located in that office Monday through Friday during those set hours. That's a legal requirement. The second one, though, which I think is the bigger reason, is if you are the registered agent, your name and address is going on the public record. I wouldn't want to put that on the public record just because. I'd rather have that privacy. Who knows what could happen? You might not think it's a big deal, but if I could outsource that and keep some anonymity, I'd prefer that. And we've seen actually, I can't think of one founder who's proactively said, hey, I want my information publicly shared unless they have to. So that's another big reason why people don't outsource the registered agent, why they don't serve as a registered agent and instead work with a partner to do it. 2 other pieces. There is state compliance and federal compliance. State compliance, if you remember from before, would be that annual fee to the state of Wyoming or the annual fee to the state of Delaware. These filings must be done each year. Otherwise, your business can fall out of compliance and risk dissolution by the state. These are typically done on an annual basis, or it could be on the 12-month anniversary after forming your business. That's state compliance. In Wyoming, it's $62. In Delaware, it's known as the annual franchise fee for $300. The final piece is federal tax filings. Now, as a business, I'm going to actually clear this up here too. You might not have a US income tax obligation if you live outside the US and have a digital online business, meaning taxes are paid where income is made. If it's a digital online business and you live outside the US, then your taxes still might be paid in, let's say, India, if that's where you live. If you have a physical presence here, if you have effectively connected income, then you might have a US income tax bill. But regardless of whether you live here or don't, you will have to make a filing to the IRS. You will have to do some sort of federal tax return. Now, this actually blew my mind when I was learning about taxes. I didn't know much about them. Now I joke in a future life I might be a CPA, an international CPA, because I've learned a lot about this. But you can actually face fines of up to $25,000 for failure to file or incorrect filings for federal tax filings. This is for Form 5472, which is a required filing for disregarded entities, or LLCs, which would mean, in English, a non-US resident with an LLC who lives outside the US. Pretty insane. These fines exist, but here's the thing. You can avoid these fines by simply making this filing. It's an informational filing, and again, you might not have a US income tax obligation, but you're going to have to make these filings. And that's why we decided, hey, we don't want to just help people form a company, we'll also help you keep it compliant. So instead of just saying, hey, here's a company and here's a list of things to do, we thought, hey, can we actually bundle in this total compliance or taxing compliance so that state filings are taken care of and federal filings are taken care of? And this comes back to our idea of you shouldn't just start your dream US business. You should be thinking, how can I keep it 100% compliant as well? And to do that, we have two options. So you can form a company. Again, we want to have that low-cost entry option that gives you everything you need to start and set up your bank account. But we also have the ability to help you keep your business compliant. So it actually covers those things I mentioned: a registered agent, state filings, and federal filings. In addition, you'll also get access to a CPA consultation and a dedicated account manager. That means forming a business, you have a specific point person you can go to for questions and concerns. You don't have to feel like you formed a company and you've been thrown to the wolves to fend for yourself. We have two options. There's a monthly payment plan of $300, or you can pay upfront annual for $2,000 and save. Depending on your business, you might prefer the monthly option for flexibility, or the annual option, you can save some dollars. Now, the other thing I want to stress here too is you absolutely can DIY. And I say that because, look, at the end of the day, my biggest goal is to make sure people actually stay compliant and do this properly. And the education is critical. But what I will say is this: anyone who's even tried to do some of these things can realize they can be a time suck. You can get stuck going into IRS forums. And I don't know about the last time you've seen an IRS form, but those forms give you a migraine when I'm reading them. So you're navigating these forums and you're stressing, crap, am I going to make a mistake that can lead to this $25,000 fine? And all while you're doing that, you're thinking, I want to grow more. I want to go build this product. That's the fun of starting a company, not filling out IRS forms. So yes, you can DIY, but I do encourage founders, and we've learned this, I've learned this the hard way, founder time is the most valuable asset. If you can outsource parts of this process to someone who's done it before for thousands of people, why not focus on what you do best and let a company handle the rest? And that's really, in a nutshell, why we exist. And the best part is, we've realized from working with founders from all over the world, this problem exists whether you're in France or in India or the UK or the US. Around the world, people really don't like doing compliance, but that's okay. We would love to step in and help there. And it's been really great to work with founders from all around the world and not just help them start their business, but work with awesome partners to help them get their bank account set up and then keep their business compliant as well. And with that in mind, the final thing I'll say is that our goal is not to do actually everything. Our goal is to actually work with best-in-class partners to fulfill all needs for startups. Doola has some awesome partners. I know Mercury also works with an incredible suite of companies as well. And I think we share that similar goal of, hey, there are specific things we want to do well. And for everything else, let's find partners who can support founders with the never-ending onboarding stack. And with that, create tools and products which allow you to manage your company at your fingertips from anywhere in the world. I sense that similarity between Mercury, Doola, other companies, where today in this day and age, the ability to help founders from everywhere isn't just a nice to have, it's a must. Because I do fundamentally believe at the end of the day, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And technology can be a way to democratize that access to people wherever they are in the world. Final thing I'm going to add here before our little special offer, and then we'll open things up to Q&A and share best ways to contact, is this can be a stressful process. I thought this was incredible in terms of how clear Alex was and the answers in terms of how to open the bank account. And I hope I made it very clear and upheld that promise of, hey, I'm going to actually give you concrete answers. But even if you watch this video, even if you go through the FAQs, even if you've done hours of research, you're still thinking, I just want to talk to someone. I get it. We've been there. We've been there with thousands of founders. And the truth is, sometimes you just want to talk to someone. So we offer free consultations, no strings attached. You don't put your email in here and it says, hey, you have to wire $1 to commit. No consultations. Sorry, no strings attached, free consultations if you'd like to chat and actually talk to a human, not a bot, but talk to a human on a Zoom call or a Google Meets call. And with that, wanted to put together a little offer for folks here. Then we're going to share best ways to get in touch. But for anyone listening today, or if you're watching this recording in the future, we want to help you, again, not just start that business, but keep it compliant. So we're offering $100 off our total compliance plan. This can help you get started. We're going into the new year. Maybe you're setting a resolution to get your business started, but let us know you watched the webinar. You can scan this QR code as well. And at the end of the day, like I said, more entrepreneurship, the better. And it's awesome to work with companies that are making this easier, making it click button easy from all around the world. So with that, Alex, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can people find Mercury? And then we'll see if there's any other questions. But if not, then you know where to find us and we'll go from there. But yeah, Alex, thanks so much. What's the best way to find you and what's the best way to get started with Mercury?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Arjun. Best way is you can go to mercury.com/sign up. We actually have a specific landing page for companies coming from Doola as well. So I think we can probably just share that out. It's just mercury.com/partner/Doola. But that way, if you sign up through there, we see it comes from a trusted partner. It can help sort of speed up the onboarding process. And then, yeah, we have a free unlimited support. There's a contact us page, and then there's a partnership outreach form there as well, which goes to my team. So if any companies, we have a lot of companies that use Mercury that also want to partner in various ways, and please feel free to reach out anytime. Would love to chat.
Love it. And one thing I'll also add too is that there's fantastic education out there. But again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I loved hearing, hey, there's unlimited support as well. I think that's so key. A lot of people think that, oh no, I do this thing or sign up with this tool and then I'm stuck. So I love to hear that on the Mercury side as well. And if you have any questions about Doola, head to our website. You can schedule a free consultation. You can check out our content, our university to learn. And again, for anyone listening who came in late at any point, we will be sharing this recording and it will be accessible. But again, even after watching this recording, if you have questions, hit up Alex, hit up Mercury, hit up myself. You can check out Doola. And it's never too late to turn your dream idea into your dream US business and get that bank account and take that first dollar, whether to check or make money from a customer. All right, fantastic. So here's what we'll do. If there are any additional questions, pop them into the chat now, and we can see if there's anything we can answer now or we can follow up with later. So we'll give folks a couple minutes just to check, pop in any questions here, and then we can go from there. While people are jotting in questions, one thing which I just want to highlight is similar to Mercury with Doola, you actually can form a company from outside the US. So you do not have to just be a US citizen. But if you are a US citizen, you have the advantage of actually being able to apply for your EIN online. So that's one thing I wanted to stress is that it is truly a global offering. You can be outside the US, you can do it remotely as well. Okay, with that, thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, check out mercury.com, check out doola.com, and wishing everyone a fantastic and early upcoming holidays and Happy New Year. Thanks a ton, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Arjun.